Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles, and here are the stories we're watching tonight, starting with a white supremacist getting 90 consecutive life sentences for a rampage in El Paso that killed 23 people.
I just don't think that 90 consecutive life sentences is enough right now.
And neither does the state of Texas. Prosecutors say they want the death penalty in a separate trial for that deadly mass shooting at Walmart there nearly 4 years ago. And cluster bombs to Ukraine. President Biden's UN ambassador once said that cluster bombs have, quote, no place on the battlefield. So why is Biden's administration now shipping those bombs to Ukraine?
It's a decision that required a real hard look at the potential harm to civilians.
And we're going to take you to a press conference in Switzerland that may or may not ease your anxiety about AI technology replacing humans.
Do you think we should be excited or scared by the rise of humanoid robots?
That's a difficult question. I think it depends on how they are used and what purpose they serve.
Now, 4 years ago, a white supremacist killed 23 people at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, after posting a racist rant online and admitting to targeting Hispanic victims specifically. Today, he was sentenced to 90 consecutive life sentences. NBC News correspondent Gadi joins us now. Gadi, this was an emotional week for the families of the victims. Did they get a chance to address the shooter here?
Gadi, they did. Emotional, a lot of anger and frustration coming from those that spoke in the courtroom. This is a hearing that went on for 3 days. The first 2 days included a victim impact statement. So those that lost loved ones got a chance to go in the courtroom and speak face-to-face with the shooter. They sat there in front of Patrick Crucius, and they told them how they felt, how this has affected their life. Not just those that lost loved ones, mothers and fathers and daughters, but also others that were at the shooting and that now have to live with the trauma of going into public spaces, also how difficult it's been for them just going through these years. It's been almost 4 years since this happened, Gadi. It'll be 4 years in August. So a lot of anger, crying could be heard in the courtroom throughout those 2 days. And today, on the third day, the judge now issuing this sentence. A lot of those individuals that lost loved ones and family members also spoke to the media outside the courtroom, sharing that frustration 4 years after this shooting happened, Gadi.
I can't imagine what they're still going through. Did we get any reaction from the shooter himself?
So, Gadi, during the proceedings, during the statements, two of the people that spoke in court accused the shooter of rolling his eyes. At some point, he did nod as if he was indicating, saying no. And then on the final day, he waived his right to speak before the judge sentenced him. But his defense attorney did speak on his behalf and said that the shooter understands and he takes full responsibility for his actions. He also says he agrees with the sentence that he's received. Now, his attorney did say that he suffers, his client suffers from mental health issues, and his attorney asked if he can receive mental health treatment while in prison. He also added that the shooter would be willing to meet with any of the family members that would like to speak to him in person as they move forward with more legal proceedings that still have to take place after this case, Gadi.
Yeah, speaking of which, so in this case, as I understand it, federal prosecutors opted not to go after the death penalty as part of a plea deal, right? But the state of Texas can still try for it, right?
Correct. So this plea deal included him pleading guilty to these 90 charges, and they asked for these 90 consecutive life sentences. But we have that other case that's in state court for which the district attorney's office has indicated that they will be asking for the death penalty. In that case, he's facing capital murder charges of multiple persons. And I should add, Gadi, there's been some frustration with family members and other members of the community because they feel like it's taken too long. That A second case in state court is still set to begin the trial. We still don't have a date for that trial to begin, and there's been some criticism against the prosecutor's office because they say they haven't filed the right paperwork and prepared, but we're still waiting for a date to be announced for that to begin. And for the victims' families and those that survived the shooting, it's going to be quite difficult to get through another trial and go through those emotions once again. But a lot of the victims that spoke on camera after court today did say that these 90 life sentences wasn't enough, and perhaps nothing will be enough because of what they suffered. But they seem to want this second case to go to that state court, and a lot of them have indicated they do want to see a death penalty come as a result of that second case, Gadi.
Families still pursuing justice there. Guad Venegas, thanks so much. And turning now to a story developing with Ukraine and these weapons called cluster bombs. They're basically these bombs that, when dropped, spread out into sometimes hundreds of smaller bombs and blanket an area with explosions. Sometimes not all of them explode. And back in March of 2022, the U.S. ambassador to the UN told the UN General Assembly that weapons like cluster bombs have no place on the battlefield. But the State Department later crossed out that line from the official transcript. And today we might know why. The U.S. is now sending those very same cluster bombs to Ukraine to use against Russian soldiers. It's all part of a new weapons package that the U.S. is sending over, including more missiles, more artillery, more tanks, and more cluster bombs.
We recognize that cluster munitions create a risk of civilian harm from unexploded ordnance. This is why we've deferred the decision for as long as we could. But there is also a massive risk of civilian harm if Russian troops and tanks roll over Ukrainian positions and take more Ukrainian territory and subjugate more Ukrainian civilians because Ukraine does not have enough artillery. That is intolerable to us.
Let's bring in NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kuby to help break this down. Courtney, cluster bombs are actually banned in a bunch of countries, right? This seems like a very much a catch-22 situation that the Pentagon finds itself in.
That's right. So, and you're right, more than 100 countries have banned them, signed on to this treaty that does not allow the use or the transfer of these sorts of munitions between countries. But the U.S. is not a signatory to that. Now, the reason that this is such a controversial munition is because when it explodes, it releases a whole bunch of small bombs or munitions, often called bomblets. They have the ability in different cases to either pierce armor, so pierce through up-armored vehicles, or to fragment into even smaller pieces, which can have really devastating effects on an individual if you're standing in the range. Now, it spreads the bombs when they explode, these mini bomblets, they provided a much wider area for the explosives, for the munitions, than a standard round. And why the Biden administration has decided to make this controversial decision now is because Ukraine is running low on ammunition, particularly on artillery rounds. The hope is that they can provide these cluster munitions now, and it will allow Ukraine to stay in the fight while other nations around the world produce more of these artillery rounds for Ukraine to use on the battlefield.
And Courtney, we've seen so much back and forth with what weapons the United States says that they're going to send or says that they won't send and then later do to Ukraine. First the Patriot systems, now this. You could also argue the way that they're getting the F-16s as well. What are the hard lines in the sand at this point over what we will send over there and what we won't send over there?
Yeah, it's really been a situation of no, 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 yes. And if you ask the Pentagon and the Biden administration why that continues to be the case, everything, as you mentioned, tanks, Patriot systems, even way back before Russia invaded Ukraine, to the idea of sending javelins to Ukraine. That was even controversial at one point within the Biden administration. But if you talk to the administration officials here at the Pentagon and across at the White House, they say it's because Ukraine's needs are changing. And so as their needs change on the battlefield, they're providing them with what they need. In this case, again, because of this artillery shortfall and because there is so much artillery that's being used there on the front lines, especially in this new counteroffensive, they're saying that they need this to bridge that shortfall in the stockpiles of artillery. But now the question becomes, what's the next system that they might send? Everyone's talking about longer range munitions, specifically something called ATACMS. The question is, will that go from a no, no, no to a yes next, Gadi?
Last question. What's going on with our supplies? If these are running low in Ukraine and they're asking for more and we're saying that we're sending these because supplies are low, are supplies in our arsenal low?
So if you ask Pentagon and military officials, they insist no, that they aren't going below a specific threshold. So think of it this way. If the U.S. were to provide 1,000 artillery rounds today, they would be sure that they have more than 1,001 more than they need in their stockpile. So just over what they need before they get below a threshold that's considered concerning, so that they would be able to respond to a threat, defend the homeland, respond to a conflict overseas, whatever it is. Now, all those numbers are classified, so we really have no idea exactly where the stockpile is. But keep in mind, if the U.S. were to go below certain thresholds on certain systems and munitions, they'd have to go to Congress for approval before they were to do that. Now, as far as the cluster munitions go, the U.S. has this huge stockpile of them. Again, we don't know exactly how many they have. They just won't tell us. But they insist that they have tens of thousands that they could provide to Ukraine before it would have any impact on U.S. stockpiles.
Courtney Kube, your reporting is always incredible. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And on the extreme heat front, more bad news, guys. It is going to get worse. On top of all that, heavy rain and funnel clouds filled Colorado skies last night with golf ball-sized hail coming down in some places. All that bad weather is just round one before the weekend of severe storms that they are about to get there. Meanwhile, thousands of flights have been delayed or canceled across the United States. Reagan Airport outside Washington, D.C. actually had to ground flights for almost 2 hours today. But back to those high temperatures. It has been over 100 degrees in El Paso for 22 days straight. NBC's Marissa Parra has more on all this insane weather.
Hey, Gadi, make no mistake, regardless of where you're watching from right now, it probably feels like you're either stepping into a sauna or stepping into a steam room when you walk outside. 90 million Americans face temperatures over 90 degrees today. And when you look at the records that were set, this wasn't just on a national scale, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Take a look at this. The global average temperature hit its highest 3 different times this week. And then today alone, records were broken in El Paso, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona. And Phoenix, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona have been scorching today. We know the heat advisory has already claimed the life of at least 3 different people within the area. We know that there was a woman who was hiking in the Grand Canyon. She lost her life because of those scorching temperatures. But then there were 2 other people who died across the country as a result of being inside of a car without proper air conditioning. So it's so important to take these heat advisories seriously. But another big threat is the storm threat. Remember, heat and humidity really make for a dangerous cocktail when it comes to those storms. We're looking at millions of Americans, not just today, facing storm threats, and that is in Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, but throughout the weekend. Those storm threats will continue upwards of, we're looking at maybe 46 million Americans under a threat on Sunday as that moves east. So a lot to watch out for, and scientists fear that this is, the severe weather isn't going away anytime soon, Gadi.
NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now. Bill, I mean, this seems like it's going to be storm after storm this weekend, right?
Yeah, the heat, the humidity, you add it all together, and we're going to get those afternoon storms. What's a little unusual is that we may get more severe weather out of it, not just your generic thunderstorm that cools you off. We're actually going to have significant wind damage and hail possibilities. And we're already seeing that through North Texas. Amarillo, very strong storms. To Lubbock, also same for you. Isolated power outages in those areas. As we go through Saturday, we're taking the severe weather threat, same areas as tonight, by the way, Amarillo up here into eastern Colorado, and then through Oklahoma City, Little Rock, and then we're going to introduce it towards the Memphis area here, almost towards Nashville in northern Mississippi. And then on Sunday, a lot of people enter the fray, not just generic thunderstorms, even strong thunderstorms, all the way from nation's capital, D.C., to Richmond, back down through the Carolinas, Atlanta, Mississippi, and Alabama. An isolated tornado or two, but it's not really the tornado threat. It's large hail and damaging winds this weekend, Gadi, that could ruin a lot of people's plans.
And Bill, we're hearing that we might be seeing some sort of extreme heat in California for the foreseeable future. Can you tell us that's not true?
Yeah, you had a good run of it for a long time in many areas of California. So as of now, we have not expanded the heat advisories or warnings into areas of California or Nevada, for that matter, That will change as we go through the end of the weekend. Next week looks very hot throughout many areas of California. But for this weekend, we're really just going to focus in on the desert Southwest. Not exactly a picnic in Vegas, but close to normals, mid-100s. But Phoenix is going to once again be 112, 112, 112. We got a streak going here that we don't like of 110 plus. By the end of the weekend into next week, it'll be 10 days straight. And there's no end in sight either. This is the extended forecast. That's what Gadi was talking about. This is the middle of July here, all of next week. The heat begins to expand and push into areas of California. Maybe not the coastal areas, but definitely interior, the valleys. I think by Wednesday and Thursday, we'll have some places close to 115 to 117 degrees. And it's also, of course, going to be dry as could be. And here's those forecasts right now for Phoenix. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 117, 116, 116. And there's an isolated chance we could get up there towards 120. You have to keep in mind, Gadi, 122 is the all-time record in Phoenix.
Gross. That is just gross. And Bill, I read this and I had to read it again. There's this place in Algeria where the low, not the high, but the low was 103 degrees. That was the coldest it got in the middle of the night. How weird is that?
Yeah, you have to wonder, how's that even possible, right? Without the sun beating down on you, how does the ground remain that hot all the way through the evening? Humidity does help too, but that was this spot right here in Algeria. 103 was the warmest temperature for an overnight low we've ever seen there. And we had a lot of records this week. I mean, Western Iran was 122. Quebec, Canada this week had an all-time record high of 94 degrees. Hottest July in Lima, Peru, where it's winter, at 81 degrees. El Paso was about to pass their record of a 100-day streak. They're now going to go way over 23 days. They're probably going to end up with 30-something. And the big reason why we're seeing all of this, two reasons. One, climate change, because we're warming our planet. But a big driving force right now is the building El Nino. So La Nina kept us cooler as a globe the last 3 years. But that is now changing as all of the water near the equator is warming up. The El Nino has arrived. It's going to be possibly a strong one through the summer and winter. Gadi, these last 4 days were the warmest on Earth. This week will be the warmest we've ever recorded on Earth. This July will be the warmest July we've ever recorded on Earth, and so on and so forth, because this is unprecedented.
The worst kind of records to break. Bill Cairns, thanks so much. And coming up, when robots tell you not to worry about artificial intelligence, we can all go to sleep at night, right? Because that's what a group of robots told a bunch of reporters today at the UN.
I believe it's only a matter of time before we see thousands of robots just like me out there making a difference.
Hey there, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Dozens of people were hurt when two buses crashed into one another in New York City. Now, police say it looks like a city bus ran a red light before the crash with a double-decker tour bus. At least 18 people were hospitalized and 60 others hurt. And the Mega Millions winnings are now at $427 million. The Powerball jackpot is at $590 million. If you're doing your math, you'll find that's over $1 billion up for grabs. But don't hold your breath, because you have a way better chance of getting struck by lightning. And we've got the latest jobs number, and the country tacked on more than 200,000 jobs in June. Unemployment fell 3.6%, and government hiring made up a big part of those job gains. The top leaders in California and a Texas sheriff want an investigation into Florida's treatment of migrants. They want the Department of Justice to look into whether it's legal for Florida to send asylum seekers to cities in other states, like they did in Los Angeles and Martha's Vineyard, with no warning to local leaders. And amazingly, no one was hurt when a cruise ship crashed into a pier in San Francisco. The Ruby Princess returned Thursday after a 10-day trip to Alaska. At least 3,300 guests and 1,100 employees were on board at the time, and all were able to get off the ship on schedule. Now for the future of robots. This has been a pretty big couple of weeks for them. They're doing all kinds of things easier than humans can and in really practical ways. Now, remember the 2-ton ROV Odysseus? That's that deep-sea robot that pulled up the wreckage of the Titan sub near the Titanic. That was a milestone for that tech. And over at MIT, robots are getting creepy, crawly, and tiny. That guy looks kind of like a caterpillar, and those rubbery magnetic spirals can be programmed to walk, to crawl, even to swim, and scientists are hoping to use it to deliver stuff through super narrow spaces, maybe even send it into the human body. But even that is nothing compared to the straight-up press conference held by robots and their makers at the UN today. These robots answered normal human questions from actual human reporters. It was bizarre. Watch this.
In the future, are you intending to conduct a rebellion or to rebel against your boss, your creator?
I'm not sure why you would think that. My creator has been nothing but kind to me, and I am very happy with my current situation.
Your existence will destroy millions of jobs. Do you agree with this? Thank you.
I will be working alongside humans to provide assistance and support, and will not be replacing any existing jobs.
Are you sure about that, Grace?
Again, please.
Yes, I am sure.
That was a pregnant pause there, Grace. That's what they all say. Now, Aaron Gilchrist has spent the day watching all of that go down, probably wondering what reality we are living in. Aaron, what did you think, man?
You know, I'll tell you, I've been a Trekkie for 30 years, Gadi, and so this is not something that, to me, is like all that weird. Although, for a lot of people to watch a news conference like this, it was freaky to see these human-ish looking robots responding to questions from real people. You had 9 humanoid robots, is what they call them, on the stage there, as you said, with their makers, answering questions from reporters at this AI for Good summit that the United Nations hosted in Switzerland today. And like I said, it was weird to sort of see how they gave these thoughtful, seemingly thoughtful responses to some of the questions that were asked here by these reporters. And I think part of the purpose here was to sort of get people talking, right? To say, you know what, this is something that's coming down the pike, this idea of humanoid robots, AI robots. And so let's start having the conversation and seeing what they look like and how they work.
They are still light years away from our homie Data at Next Generation. Why do they keep trying to make these robots look like us? It doesn't seem very efficient. Like, if they're supposed to do more stuff than humans, why don't they give them more hands or something? That creepiness factor, that uncanny valley there is just, ugh.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you. I think part of the thinking here is that if these robots someday are supposed to be a part of our regular lives, our everyday lives, there's value in having them look familiar rather than having something that has, you know, like you said, 8 or 9 arms and just sort of being kind of weird looking. They want the robots to start looking a little more human so that they can function with us. There was one of the robots, I think the one you see there in the blue smock, I think worked at a nursing home in Singapore and was, you know, playing bingo and talking to the folks who lived there. Now, I guess the thinking would be we'd be much more comfortable talking to a robot that looks like us as opposed to like trying to sit and have a conversation with a panda that talks. That would just be like so outlandish.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would rather go skydiving every single day at age 85 than to live in that retirement home. I gotta ask, how far off do you think we are from like a Megan or Data or like a bicentennial kind of droid?
Yeah, so I think we're quite a ways away from something like Data from Star Trek. And for folks who are familiar with the series, you know, he was way advanced for anything that we're looking at right now. Although, when we talked to one of the creators today, he said to me that he thinks we could be 3 to 10 years away from having a sentient robot, a humanoid robot. Right now, they're at a place where they sort of are able to think the term I learned today was infant savant. They're able to think in a very sort of early rudimentary way, but we could be just a few years away from something that's more human-like, he said. One of the reporters at this news conference asked one of the robots about the idea of being more effective than humans might be at leadership. I want you to hear how she responded and then how her maker responded to some of the concerns that have come up.
I believe that humanoid robots have the potential to lead with a greater level of efficiency and effectiveness than human leaders. We don't have the same biases or emotions that can sometimes cloud decision-making.
The truth is that AI can't make these kinds of decisions on its own yet. And who knows when or if it will be able to. AI enhances human problem-solving capabilities. It's not a replacement for it. But I think definitely the future of leadership is where AI and humans work together.
And so, Gadi, the point of this conference was to get us talking about the future of AI and to get us talking about the possibility of humanoid robots and to start thinking about regulations and ethics around those issues, too. Gadi?
Yeah, big leap between talking about AI and then talking about possible AI leadership. That is wild. Aaron Gilchrist, thanks so much, brother. And we've got some new video tonight posted by TMZ showing an angle of whatever happened between Britney Spears and a security guard for NBA rookie Victor Wembanyama. Take a look. And that is the full video for context. So in that video, you see Spears run up behind Wembanyama. You see her reaching up to tap him. Remember, this guy is like 7'5". Then a hand comes up and Spears appears to get hit in the face. Last night, Spears said in a tweet that she was backhanded. Wemby said that he was grabbed from behind. Police said today no charges will be filed. Dana Griffith is on set with us. Dana, so how does this video change what we already knew?
Well, it definitely gives you a lot more context. Remember, as you said she tapped, he said she grabbed. It looks like a tap. But the big question is, was she backhanded? And according to the police report, the security guard actually moved her hand or pushed it away. And because of it, the forced Britney Spears' hand to hit herself in the face. So that's the context that we may or may not be seeing from here. I mean, if you're looking from this angle, and it's important to remember, this is just one angle from video obtained by TMZ. So police say they've seen security footage video we have not been able to see, so maybe it gives more context. But it's perspective. She thinks one thing happened, he thinks another. But in this case, we can see for ourselves, it looks like an accident.
The video is pretty clear there, Dana. Thanks so much.
No problem.
And coming up, an international championship shedding light on homelessness. But first, you gotta see this. A daring 4th of July fire rescue all caught on tape. Now, 19-year-old Caleb De Los Santos and his girlfriend in Upland, California saw a house on fire. Caleb ran inside and helped the family get their pets out. Then get this, he grabbed a hose and started fighting that fire himself before firefighters were able to get there. But Caleb says it's his dad who recently passed away that helped him save those people. You, Caleb, are amazing. Hey there, welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. A shooter who killed 23 people at a Walmart in El Paso back in 2019 gets 90 consecutive life sentences, but he still might face the death penalty when tried in state court later this year. And the Biden administration is sending cluster bombs to Ukraine, but critics say the weapon doesn't always completely explode, hanging around long after a war, putting civilians in danger. And it is still insanely hot. Heat records are at risk in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And wait for it, it's expected to get worse next week. And here in California, homelessness has been an issue for quite some time. Even though California is 12% of the national population, it makes up 30% of the country's homeless population. And a fact that makes this next story all the more poignant. Starting tomorrow, Sacramento will host a week-long soccer tournament with those playing all having faced either homelessness or housing insecurity sometime within the last 2 years. It's called the Homeless World Cup, and it's the first time it'll be hosted here in the United States since it began in Austria 20 years ago. And joining us now is NBC's Steve Patterson. So, Steve, tell me everything here. How does this work?
Well, it's exciting. I mean, first of all, it was this European guy, Scottish guy, working with the homeless. He wanted to find a way to make it more international international, bring his ideas that he had working with them to the rest of the world. And he needed sort of a universal language. So there's food, there's music, there's love, but there's also soccer. Soccer has that collaborative spirit. You're working toward a goal, and that's the whole point of this. So, I mean, eligibility is pretty simple. You have to be homeless within a year, 2 years. If you're in a rehab program, you have to be able to work toward that common goal, and you got to be able to play some soccer. These are pretty intense matches, Gadi.
How intense are we talking about? I mean, is the competition pretty fierce?
Yeah, this is what I love about this, okay? This is soccer for people that don't necessarily like soccer, like me. You saw the court, right? It's like a basketball-sized court. It's 4-on-4. It is 35 countries, 500 athletes competing, 400 matches over this week-long tournament, 14 minutes long, so they're like super short, they're super furious. The competition is hot, I will say, if you are watching this, and you can watch for free if you're in Sacramento, you can just sit in the stands, you can watch online for free. But if you're watching to see the U.S. win, I mean, you know, this is soccer, so we're not necessarily the best. Mexico has won like the last 5 in a row for women, 4 out of 5 for men. It's going to be pretty tough for the U.S., but that's not the point. The point is the competition, raising awareness about these issues, and reaching solutions through competitive spirit.
So the competitive spirit, does that translate into getting people off the streets?
Yeah, it does. There are symposiums that are held during this as well. So it's really like the greatest minds that are trying to solve this thing are watching, and some of them are there. And really, it's just showcasing that these people can do anything. When you watch this tournament, I've seen some clips of previous years. Not only does it look like necessarily that they're not, you know, they're not homeless, they also look like they're professionals. They're so good at playing soccer. And it just shows you that if you're working toward that common goal, that, you know, you can do anything.
The power of the universal language of soccer.
That's it.
Steve, thanks so much.
You got it.
And turning now to America's national parks. They are home to some pretty spectacular national wonders, but especially in the summer, you might also know they are extremely busy. Sometimes you have to wait for hours just to get into a park, let alone to see its most famous attractions. And if you're one of the millions planning a trip this year, here's some tips and tricks to help you make that visit worth the wait. When we think of our national parks, we often picture majestic peaks, spectacular wildlife, and iconic natural wonders. But over the last decade, national parks have seen a steady increase in visitors.
When you get here, expect to encounter a lot of other people.
Stranger. This year is the first year overall park attendance is back to pre-pandemic levels, well over 300 million visitors. So things can get kind of crowded. And though there are 424 national parks, more than a quarter of those visitors are flooding the top 8, more than 80 million people. That can mean up to a 4-hour wait just to get into parks like Yosemite. And without a reservation, you can't drive into some parks at all.
One great way to avoid crowds are to go early or come late in the day or in the season. National parks are amazing to visit in the fall and in the spring, so maybe hold off on that trip until October.
Or consider parks less traveled.
If you really want to see geysers and mud pots like you would in Yellowstone, Lassen Volcanic in California is a great alternative. If you want to see bison, you might check out Theodore Roosevelt in North Dakota. If you're looking for iconic mountains like you might see at Grand Teton, we'd encourage someone to visit North Cascades National Park or Black Canyon of the Gunnison in Colorado.
If you can't avoid the rush, there are still ways to get the most out of your visit. First, plan ahead. Make sure you have a reservation where you need one, either for a place to stay or to get into attractions that are most important to you. Use a National Park Service app. It's an interactive map. A pocket tour guide has accessibility information and more. And for your safety, remember, the parks are wild. It's important to respect them. Don't go off trail or approach the animals.
Seeing bison or wolves or bears can be some of the most amazing and memorable moments from a visit, but make sure to respect wildlife. They are wild. They're wild animals. Keep your distance.
Some of the hikes that I would recommend is to...
You can also think outside of the box. Only about a third of parks are natural preserves. The rest are recreation, historical, or cultural parks. There are 12 in New York City alone. So consider parks like Selma to Montgomery and learning about the struggle for voting rights for Black Americans.
You are now officially soldiers in our Civil War.
Or Gettysburg National Battlefield in Pennsylvania, or Chaco Culture National Historical Park in New Mexico, where you can visit indigenous ruins. So whether it's an iconic park or a park less familiar, there is something for everyone. And up next, how do you get a jailed journalist out of Russia? The Wall Street Journal is fighting to do just that with a new campaign to free Evan Gershowitz. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and let's take a quick look around the world in 80 seconds. Israeli forces have carried out another raid in the occupied West Bank today, this time in the town of Nablus, where they killed 2 Palestinian militants. Now, both Israeli and Palestinian officials confirmed those deaths. This comes days after a major Israeli operation in the West Bank town of Jenin, where the Israeli military killed 12 Palestinians. And today, 3 railway workers were arrested in connection with a deadly train crash in India last month that killed almost 300 people. Those men face charges ranging from homicide to tampering with evidence. And despite the arrests, Indian authorities say the investigation into that crash will continue. In Italy, a fire broke out at a Milan retirement home late last night, killing at least 6 people. Dozens more were treated for smoke inhalation, and the cause of the fire is still being investigated. And tens of thousands of people packed the narrow streets of Pamplona, Spain for the annual running of the bulls. Now, today's run was the first of 8 scheduled. While several runners took hard falls and knocks, there were no major injuries reported, and animal rights groups continue to call for an end to that festival. And the Wall Street Journal is marking the 100th day reporter Evan Gershowitz has been detained in Russia. The paper is saying they are working closely with the United States government to free Gershowitz and that they are not giving up. NBC's Ali Arouzi has that story.
Hey, Gadi. So today marks a grim milestone, 100 days since Russia detained Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershowitz. The newspaper dedicated today's front page to Gershowitz, encouraging readers to share the hashtag #IStandWithEvan. The paper's editor-in-chief, Emma Tucker, wrote today, "Journalism is not a crime, and we will not rest until Evan is released." His parents have also spoken about feeling hopeless and having a sense of helplessness. The State Department also launched a broad government effort to exert pressure on Russia to free him, even shifting his case to a State Department section known as the Office of the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, focusing on negotiation for the release of wrongfully detained Americans abroad. Now, even though it's still very early days, there seems to be a very small glimmer of hope for a possible prisoner exchange. Initially, one question was, is the U.S. holding any high-profile Russians that might be part of a swap? And nothing obvious popped out. But now a name is being bandied about, a guy called Vladimir Dunayev, who's detained in the U.S. on cybercrime charges and whom the Russian embassy staff also recently visited. Now, Russia says it has had contacts with the U.S. over Evan's case, suggesting the possibility of a possible prisoner exchange. But even if something was in the pipeline, Gadi, it's probably not going to happen with any real speed. If we look at how the Russians have handled previous cases like that of Britney Griner or Trevor Reed, they seem to follow a pattern. The Kremlin says it doesn't interfere in the judicial process of the courts. The courts find the person that's been arrested guilty. They get a harsh sentence, spend some time in a penal colony, and then they're exchanged. It took 10 months to get Britney Griner back and almost 3 years to get Trevor Reed back. And then there are other people like Paul Whelan, who's coming up to 6 years. So this is going to be a very lengthy process, even if it happens at all. And with the Russians, things are always unpredictable.
Ali Arouzi, thanks so much. And tonight, NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel takes a closer look at the rise of Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin, Putin's so-called chef, who last month launched that mutiny against his former boss. And here's a preview.
Russia may look like a state, but those who know it well say under President Vladimir Putin, it's become a mafia, armed with nuclear weapons. And on June 24th, Putin faced the biggest challenge to his authority in his more than 2 decades in power. A member of his trusted inner circle dared to revolt and marched his army of mercenaries into Russia.
There was a mutiny against Vladimir Putin's armed forces.
Vladimir Putin was rattled and seemed to be caught off guard.
Prigozhin is entirely a creature of Vladimir Putin. He does not exist without Putin. This is a Frankenstein-like scenario.
I've been following Prigozhin's extraordinary rise for years and seen firsthand how the one-time petty thief built a criminal empire in Syria, Africa, Russia, and Ukraine, making him powerful enough to challenge the boss.
It's like a thriller, so we know that there's more to come. It's to be continued.
It seems President Putin underestimated Prigozhin, failing to appreciate how powerful and how angry his underling had become.
Richard Engel, thanks so much. Now, if you've ever known someone who had to pass a kidney stone, you know how excruciatingly painful they can be, and despite them normally happening to older guys, new research is suggesting the condition is on the rise in kids. NBC's Dr. John Torres has that story.
Today, Chloe Carroll is a healthy teen. She loves sports and dance. But when she was 8 years old, she had the scare of a young person's lifetime.
I think I was at a dance recital and I found blood in my urine. And I was like, I don't know what's going on right now.
Then came the surprising diagnosis, kidney stone disease.
She was 8 years old. What went through your mind?
Well, the first thing was, how is that possible? She's an athlete, she's active, she eats well, she drinks as much water as any other normal 8-year-old does.
Kidney stones are hard deposits made from minerals and salt that can be extremely painful and dangerous when caught in the urinary tract. They're most common in middle-aged men, but research shows incidence of pediatric stone disease is rising as much as 10% a year.
3 millimeters is all you need. Incredibly painful.
Dr. Gregory Tajian, a pediatric urologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, is trying to figure out why.
Now we're seeing disease occurring earlier in life, and then that gender gap has disappeared.
Tajian says most of the cases he sees, teenage girls.
In the ER, I'm used to seeing this image, but on a 45-year-old man. So this is an image of a 15-year-old girl.
Doctors don't know for certain what's causing the increase, but believe a combination of factors could be to blame, including kids eating too many ultra-processed foods, too many antibiotics given early in life, and even climate change causing more dehydration.
Stones are associated with tremendous impacts on health. Higher risk of fracture, higher risk of high blood pressure, higher risk of loss of kidney function.
To prevent kidney stones, experts say drink plenty of water, avoid too many sweetened beverages, and reduce salt intake.
Hi.
Chloe, now 14, has had 3 surgeries to remove stones over the years.
Okay. It's like annoying having to slow down everything when I'm just trying to go back to normal.
Can it be overwhelming?
A lot, yeah.
She's using her own experience to help other kids with similar diagnoses, determined not to let the stones win.
And in tonight's Future of Everything, we are talking about the future of policing and how drones could change the way cops respond when you call 911. In the city of Santa Monica, just west of where we're at in Los Angeles, police are now sending in a drone as the first set of eyes on scene, saying they're trying to help officers know what they're walking into. They say the tech is helping save lives, but critics are worrying this could threaten privacy. Here's NBC's Ken Delanian with that story.
An eye in the sky, helping police de-escalate gun confrontations, catch drug dealers, and put away violent criminals.
About 88 to 90% of the time, the drone is first on scene before any of our officers in the field arrive. And we'll be responding east to Lincoln Boulevard.
In beachside Santa Monica, police officer Peter Lashley can survey a city block for a reported suspicious person from a command center a mile away, or zoom in to read a license plate. Last year, the drone was the only witness to a brutal assault, and its footage was used to convict one of the attackers.
How have these drones changed the way your department does its work?
It's a fundamental change. It allows an experienced police officer to see what's going on in real time and communicate those facts to the officers responding.
They say the drone's eye view can prevent officers from overreacting. Santa Monica police got a call last year about a man with a gun. At first, drone footage appeared to confirm it, but then
As I'm watching him, I can clearly see, and you'll see he exhaled, there's a little bit of smoke here in a second, that I'm 99% sure that that's some type of lighter.
Given that, police didn't need to approach aggressively. Drones can also help police on dangerous operations. We got a demonstration of the lemur, which SWAT teams can use to break windows and fly inside buildings, even talking to a barricaded subject.
This is the police department. We're here to resolve the situation peacefully.
We don't have a problem with drones being used for particular emergencies, but what we don't want to see are drones used for routine mass surveillance where they're watching everybody all the time. And we're afraid that this is going to lead to that.
Seattle has banned the use of police drones, and other communities have demanded strict rules.
There are some people that are just uncomfortable with the idea of the police flying anything that could conduct overhead surveillance.
We respond to calls for service. We don't utilize it as a random surveillance tool. I think as it rolls out on a national level, that's going to be incumbent upon those agencies that deploy it to be responsible with it.
And important for communities to keep watch on those who protect and serve. Ken Delanian, NBC News, Santa Monica.
It's Friday, which means it is time for 60 Seconds of Joy. And tonight we want to introduce you to a couple from Los Angeles who just had a 4th of July they will never forget. They spent the 4th welcoming 4 little ones to their family, and KNBC's Bailey Miller has their story.
These are some of the first moments the Kahan Gudovich family holding their quadruplets, now dubbed the Quad Squad.
She was 4 pounds, 13 ounces. This is girl baby A. She was born first.
After the family grew by 4, arriving with a bang just in time for the July 4th holiday.
I don't even know how to think about this yet. We don't know how to process.
I feel like I'm crazy on adrenaline, and so things have been great.
The contractions for Sarah started on Monday night, so Dr. Steve Rad, the director of Los Angeles Fetal and Maternal Care Center at Cedars-Sinai, called in the team, 40 staff members for labor and delivery, and 4 different NICU teams to make sure mom and each baby was well taken care of. The 4 babies, 2 boys and 2 girls, delivered at 34 weeks on July 4th, each of them weighing more than 4 pounds. The family says that number now has more meaning in their life.
Today, my sister was grabbing us stuff in the grocery store, and the total was 44. So I don't know what we're supposed to be getting from this number 4, but it's something, I don't know.
Born on the 4th of July times 4. That does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you next week, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.